I have made some pretty deep and strategic videos, but this one might go harder than any of the other ones I've done, as my presentation has 41 slides for today. Here we go! Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka Thrabe, and you here for another Pathfinder Second Edition video, and welcome to my Summoner Deep Dive. This is going to be kind of a class guide, but we're going to be going into a lot of nuance today beyond just basics. The Summoner is one of my favorite classes, and I consider multiple different Summoner builds as one of my primary characters in my campaigns, so I've got a lot to say today. Before we get into that, let's do some of the businessy stuff. If you like this content, please subscribe to support it. My subscriber number is going up and up and up, and that is making me feel good, giving me that dopamine hit, making me want to continue making this content. And thank you to all of you who are also choosing to support me financially. There's now 90 of you in my YouTube members, so thanks. It really and truly means a lot. It is very encouraging to see all the positive support from the Pathfinder and Starfinder community. As a YouTube member, if you choose to support me that way, you do get early access to all of my videos, sometimes multiple weeks before they actually hit the channel. I have some really cool plans for videos in the works that are going to talk about Pathfinder 2E and Starfinder 2E compatibility, and I need a little more time to coordinate those things. So don't you worry, they're coming, but I'm trying to get some collab stuff worked out, and that hasn't quite come together yet. Today's video idea is coming from Shrimp Girl, who donated to support this video, so thank you very much for that, and I hope you all enjoy. And if you are anywhere in the South Carolina area and you are free from September 19th to 21st, there is a cool little con in that area called Mega Moose Con that I will be attending to play a bunch of Pathfinder 2E and Starfinder 2E. So if you want to meet me and say hello and maybe have a chance to share a table with me, consider checking out that con. This is not a sponsored plug. I just really enjoyed that con last year, and I'm looking forward to doing a ton of gaming. So with that out of the way, let's talk about what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to talk about the class fantasy and the class basics and the class features first, and then the deep dive is really going to start with talking about choosing your Eidolon, and this section is probably going to go a lot deeper than you expect. Then we're going to talk about some of the quirks of playing a summoner, talk about selecting your spells and some other general tips of that nature, and then talk about what you might do if you are playing in a free archetype game. Now, before I get going here, if you enjoy what you see in today's video, and you're like, man, I want even more information about the summoner, please consider checking out Flurry of Blunder's guide to the PF2E summoner. It is a very long and very good document, and if you are interested in some of the crunch of, hey, what exactly should my activities look like to maximize my damage, and you want to see some of the charts about, hey, what does it look like casting Electric Arc versus Boost Eidolon versus making extra attacks, there's some really good information in this guide, and again, I will link this in the video description. This was super useful to me when I was building my initial summoner characters. So, what is the class fantasy offered by the summoner? And I'm going to ignore lore this time around, and I'm going to just stick to the mechanics. I'm going to say that the summoner is your flexible 2-token character. And this often, but not always, means that one of the bodies you have on the battlefield is a melee character, and the other is a spellcaster. There are plenty of other classes, especially if you're in free archetype games, and you can go into things like Beastmaster, that can put 2 tokens onto the battlefield. But what you can do with those tokens often tends to be pretty limited. The Summoner offers you an insanely customizable loadout of options, split across 4 actions. One of the biggest draws of playing a Summoner is that you get 4 actions due to something called tandem activities, which we're going to get into in another slide or two here. And you are going to have some tandem activities like Act Together that are very good action compression. And you might take more than 4 actions in a single turn, even at relatively low levels. And another draw here is that summoners can be played as spellcasters of any spell tradition, meaning that this is one of the most customizable classes in the game. You could be a caster that also does melee stuff that could be of any spell tradition. That's really cool. Pathfinder is a system of customization. Like, if you're an optimization nerd, there's so much for you to chew on in Pathfinder, but this class in particular offers nearly endless customization. So let's talk about act together. So you and your Eidolon act as one. Either you or your Eidolon takes an action or activity using the same number of actions as act together, and the other takes a single action. What this means is let's say you take a 2-action activity. Your Eidolon then gets a 1-action activity as sort of a bonus. But since you normally have 3 actions in a turn, you still have 1 action remaining. Or you can split this in other ways. You do a 3-action activity, then your Eidolon gets a 1-action activity. So you effectively have 4 actions. However, you don't get to 2 and 2. You don't get to do a 2-action activity, and then your Eidolon do a 2-action activity because of how act together works. When you do one of these things, your Eidolon gets 1, or vice versa. This is a very, very, very powerful ability. And at low levels, sometimes this is something as simple as, okay, we're both going to act together and move. And even if it is just for one of my actions using act together, I net 1 action out of it and we both are now in the appropriate place, that alone is very strong. But as you get to higher levels and you have better spells and more options, you can do crazier things. As a side note here, there are other tandem activities such as tandem movement here, which just explicitly allows you both to move together. But you can't use a tandem action, like act together, to do another tandem action inside of it. This is the, like, you can't wish for more wishes with your genie wish sort of situation. But once you have tandem movement, you could do something like open up your turn with tandem movement. You have both moved, 2 actions total. Then you do a 2-action act together. You cast Electric Arc, 4 actions total. And then your Eidolon makes a strike, 5 actions total. So this is a very, very strong class in terms of cramming a lot into your turn cycles. And as a quick aside here, note that super, super literally based on the Greek pronunciation of the word Eidolon is pronounced Eidolon. American audiences don't pronounce it that way. So, that is what it is. But before someone gets in there and like, actually, it's Eidolon, like, yes, I know the difference between an Omicron and an Omega. Now, with all of this tandem action stuff and your turn cycle often being broken into a 2-action activity and then 2 1-action activities that are separate, it means that your single action activities can shine on this class. And you are a charisma-based caster, meaning you can be very, very good at demoralizing. And many summoners are going to find that they want to take battle medicine as another very strong 1-action activity, and that one is strong enough that it is going to get its own section a little bit later on in this video. Your Eidolon is going to share many of your features. So for example, if you have a hand wrap of mighty blows or another weapon with runes on it, your Eidolon can benefit from those runes. Or if you're trained in some skills, your Eidolon is going to be trained in those same skills. Although you can get some bonus skill trainings that are specific to your Eidolon if you take a certain feat. And this often means that when you are in roleplay moments, you get to roll twice as many dice as everyone else. Oh, everyone make a perception check as you try to clock what's going on. Well, okay, you can do that, and your Eidolon can too. Oh, there's some magical stuff going on here. Make an Arcana check. Oh man, hey, you know what? My Eidolon happens to be trained in Arcana because I am too. And the summoner feels sort of like you're rolling a lot of roleplay rolls with advantage, which is pretty cool. Now, I will say, it is not always going to feel appropriate that your Eidolon makes every single roll, even if it is trained in it. And I think there has to be some amount of GM discretion there as to, like, can my Eidolon actually attempt this role? And since your Eidolon is one of your primary features, why don't we go ahead and start deep diving that? So your Eidolon is going to be kind of like your subclass. And many times for spellcasters, selecting your subclass is selecting what spell tradition you are going to be using for your character. And there's some more nuance there most of the time, but that's what the decision essentially boils down to. However, I don't think at a super nuanced level that is really what choosing your Eidolon is about. I think on the surface, and I think most people when they start building their summoners are going to go, hey, which spell casting tradition do I want to be? That's how I'm going to pick my subclass. And I don't think that's actually true, but we're going to start by pretending that your spell tradition is what matters. And I'm going to use this section to prove a point, so bear with me. As a quick refresher, here are some of the things that the spell lists are good at. And I have, I think, a couple of videos on spell lists specifically. And if you aren't already checking out Pathfinder's content, if you're interested in spells, his content is fantastic. So these are kind of the strengths of each one of the lists, with Arcane being the best at targeting all of the saves offensively, with Divine being kind of the best combined support and healing, Occult being your best for debuffs and buffs, but having some access to healing as well. And the Primal is perhaps the most balanced spell list, with a good set of offensive spells and the heal spell on it. And there are some weaknesses to each one of the lists. The numbers that you see in parentheses here are the number of spells in each one of those given lists, accurate as of a couple of books ago. But all four of the spell lists are kind of great in their own ways. They all have real strengths and real weaknesses. So you're going to kind of have to figure out, well, what do I want to do as far as my spells as a summoner goes? And this is going to be a particularly interesting question on the summoner, because even after you've leveled up, you're going to have a total of 4 spell slots and 5 known spells. Your character essentially has a martial Eidolon in most cases and a caster PC character. And you don't get to hit with martial accuracy and have unlimited spell slots. You know, that doesn't make sense. So your power needs to be balanced somehow. What's kind of unique here in terms of that balance is, since you have limited spell slots, you are only firing off 4 total spells over the course of a day. And a normal full spellcaster is going to cast way more spells than that. They are going to have 4 max rank spell slots alone, right? And so while your spell list does certainly matter for selecting what spells you are going to have, since you are casting fewer leveled spells, I think it matters a lot less which exact tradition you are for a summoner. What does matter is that you have a good bread and butter cantrip that you can keep spamming. Because so many times your turn is going to be 2 action cantrip, 1 action strike, and that is all done via your act together, and then you have 1 action to do something else. And if you were to do a leveled spell every single turn, in the first combat of the day, you might burn through all 4 of your spell slots. And that's not great. So what matters is that you have a good cantrip more than anything else here. And for most people, that means Electric Arc, which is just the gold standard of what a good cantrip is. Notably, for those of you who are mixing Pathfinder 2E and Starfinder 2E content, there is another Electric Arc type spell, Ricochet, which is 30-foot range, arcane or divine, targeting up to 2 creatures, dealing bludgeoning or slashing damage with the same damage scaling as Electric Arc. So Electric Arc itself is arcane and primal, and Ricochet adds divine to the options that you can get for an Electric Arc spell. And once you start leveling up, you could buy a Jolt Coil, which is a spell heart that gives you access to Electric Arc. So if 3 of the 4 spell traditions as of level 1 can have access to Electric Arc, And the occult casters, after, maybe leveling up once and saving up a little bit of money, can potentially buy themselves or find a jolt coil. What is actually driving the Eidolon choice? If your spell tradition doesn't matter as much because you don't have as many spell slots, and everybody can end up with access to a decent cantrip, what is actually selecting for your Eidolon then, if not the spell list? And I think the action are what is actually defining your choice. And it took me a while to realize this. When you are splitting up your turn via act together, one of you each turn is going to get to do a 2-action activity. And I think by default, most people are going to be thinking that the summoner PC is the one who is going to be using 2 actions, doing that to cast a spell. But some of these other Eidolon options have very good 2-action activities. For example, the Dragon Eidolon has a breath weapon. The Fey Eidolon can get magical understudy for free and be able to cast spells itself. The Anger Phantasm, I forget what it's called, has a Furious Strike that is like a vicious swing. And I think when it comes down to it, if you are selecting your Eidolon, the singular most important thing is who gets 2 actions a turn. If you always want the summoner to be doing the 2-action activities, then it doesn't really make sense to pick some of these Eidolon options that are going to have their own 2-action activities. Or you might build in a way where, hey, I always want to Furious Strike every single turn. I'm going to warp my spell list and my build so that I have as many good 1-action activities, spells, and options as possible on my summoner PC. Or you might do something mixed where you're like, okay, maybe I'll open the fight with a breath weapon and then I'll start using spells on my summoner. And I think a lot of the nuance of your build actually comes from whoever is doing these 2-action activities. And the value of some single action spells, such as Shield, or I believe it is called Protect Companion, which is Shield for a friend, those sorts of things can change wildly depending on who is doing 2 actions regularly in a turn. Now, if you are looking for my generic recommendation, which one of the Eidolon options do I think is the best? I personally think it is the plant option. This gives you access to the primal spell list, and I think Heal is an absurdly good spell on a summoner in particular, and I'll talk about that more later. And the primal list also has very good blasting options. All your fireballs and lightning bolts and such are on this spell list. The plant Eidolon is good at striking. Its Tendril Strike action that you get at level 1 just increases the reach of your attack by 5 feet. But you can also do things like disarm, shove, or trip with that as well. And this tends to mean that it becomes a very, very good reactive striker as of level 6, which is when your Eidolon can get its attack of opportunity. And so you can do things like, all right, 1-action Tendril Strike trip on my turn. Oh, now you're going to get up. I've got massive range because I have growing vines and all of my melee attacks just have reach now, not just the ones that I Tendril Strike. And so you can be annoying, you can be tripping, you can be reactive striking, and it is just a very, very good, well-rounded character. And the summoner has a chain of feats that can keep increasing the size of your Eidolon. And as the size of your Eidolon increases, the range that it threatens and covers increases, eventually resulting in your plant Eidolon just being able to reactive strike over like half of the field. It's honestly kind of wild. A quick note here on stats. When you select your Eidolon, you are also going to kind of go down a strength-based route or a dex-based route for your Eidolon. The choice probably matters the most at level 1 and then smooths out a lot from there. You want early damage because you are adding that juicy strength modifier to your damage. Select strength. If you want your AC to be optimal early on, select dexterity. This gap is going to even out around level 5. And if you are not sure which one you want, I want you to think about what you are going to be using your Eidolon for in roleplay. Are you more likely to want that Eidolon to smash something? Are you more likely to want that Eidolon to be able to kind of sneak in and spy on some people? And you can use the roleplay opportunities and options as your tiebreaker if you're not sure which one of these you like better. The Summoner is kind of a unique class, and a lot of weird rules things end up happening when you're a character split across two separate bodies with two different sets of stats that are sharing some things but not other things. So let's start talking about some of the quirks of playing a Summoner. And the first has to do with your Boost Eidolon feature. Now, this is a focus cantrip, so this costs one action. This is repeatable, with a massive range of 100 feet. So, your Eidolon gains a +2 status bonus to damage rolls, and if it deals more than 1 damage die, it's 2 per weapon damage die. This is kind of cool. You remember how I said one action activities are going to thrive on a summoner? This is an innate class feature that you get that everybody can do. However, you might end up taking the Extend Boost Focus spell as one of your class feats. And this is where we're going to see the summoner really feeling mad that is multi-attribute dependent. So, if your next action is to cast Boost Eidolon or Reinforce Eidolon, attempt a skill check associated with the skill associated with the tradition of magic you gain from your Eidolon, such as Nature for a Primal Eidolon. The DC is usually a standard difficulty DC of your level, but the GM can assign a different DC based on circumstances. Then the effect depends on the result of your check. On a critical success, your Boost Eidolon can last 4 rounds, on a success, 3 rounds, and on a regular failure, the spell lasts 1 round like normal, but you don't spend the focus point for Extend Boost. And this is a free action. Again, summoners are really good at cheating action economy. For those of you who have played a bard, this is your lingering composition that can keep your buff going for quite some time. Now here's the thing. Your summoner is charisma based. You need that. You're maxing that. As a secondary skill, you probably need dexterity for your armor. And now, as a tertiary skill, you need the stat that is associated with whatever spellcasting tradition you are going to cover here. Which, using my plant-based example from before, which is a primal tradition, that means that I need wisdom for my nature checks. And if you are trying to maximize the chance of Extend Boost working, you might be sacrificing something like your con or your AC or your saving throws to make this work. The Summoner is a chonky 10 HP per level HP class, and it needs that because your Eidolon is often going to be in the mix in melee combat. But you would, in theory, like to really boost the con score up as high as possible, since you do really need to not go down. If you go down, manifesting your Eidolon again is a 3-action activity, and you might either not be able to summon your Eidolon realistically in combat again, or it wastes the majority of your next turn doing so. And as I've drafted up summoner characters, I have very much felt the tension of trying to get Extend Boost to work. It is a powerful feature, but I don't know that it is one that every single summoner is going to find themselves taking, because succeeding on this like standard difficulty DC for your level is not something that is going to be guaranteed. As a general note on level-based DCs, they will get easier over time as you raise your proficiency degree to expert and then master and then legendary, and as you gain some items or other buffs that are going to help you succeed in those skill checks. Now, as far as quirks go, here's the bad one, and it's damaging area of effects and you. So I'm just going to read the full text here. Quote, like with your actions, if you and your Eidolon are both subject to the same effect that affects your hit points, you apply those effects only once, applying the greater effect. For instance, if you and your Eidolon got caught in the area of effect that would heal or damage both of you, only the greater amount of healing or damage applies. This means that the fire bolts, the lightning bolts, the cave fangs of the world, the AoE damaging effects that can hit both of you, these are the things that are the scariest. And at lower levels, this is just damage. And it sucks, but it's just damage. Hit points are replenishable. At higher levels, though, damaging effects often come with riders. They are going to come with things like the frightened condition or the sickened condition, even. And it is going to often feel like you are rolling your saving throws with disadvantages against the bosses who can cast very scary high level spells. And if you are constantly just taking the worst damage, the worst save, it doesn't feel great. So your class has a lot of upsides. Like you have martial degree of accuracy, you have you have spell casting. It's not full casting, but you have spell casting. So this is one of the big things that is gonna suck. And kind of on that note, let's talk about resistances. So if you are both getting hit with an AoE, you are always going to take the greater amount of damage. So let's imagine that your summoner has a charm that gives them 5 resistance to fire. And so they don't take very much damage from that fireball. But your Eidolon does not have that resistance because your resistances and your Eidolon's resistances are separate, right? So that means that a lot of times it's not worth going out of your way to get a resistance because it's not going to apply because the other person is often going to take the greater amount of damage. That is not to say that resistances are not going to do anything on a summoner. They absolutely will. But if conceptually in your head you're going, hey, I would like to be resistant to a whole bunch of things to make my HP go further, that might not always be true. So if you want to make your HP go further, battle medicine is probably the thing that does that. So you and your Eidolon are separate creatures that share a single HP pool. So if I am a person who can do battle medicine, I can do battle medicine on the summoner, and I can separately do battle medicine on the Eidolon. And that makes the battle medicine from each person go further. So if you, the summoner, have battle medicine, it's really cool because you can battle medicine yourself, and that heals both you and your Eidolon. You only receive the healing once, obviously, but this allows you to do the touch range battle medicine and heal your Eidolon, who is maybe 50 feet away from you fighting some goblins. Now we're going to get into some weird rules stuff, and there's a very heavy community disagreement about this. Your Eidolon is capable of getting the battle medicine skill feat via the skilled partner class feat. And this, in theory, can allow the summoner and the Eidolon to both have the ability to use battle medicine. And this means that you can be capable of handing out an absolutely disgusting number of battle medicines each combat. There's some rules weirdness here, as Eidolons normally cannot use items, but you specifically can go and get the battle medicine skill feat, which suggests that you should be able to do battle medicine. There's a bunch of other rules that I'm not going to go into because I think I could make an entire video on the nuance here. But my ruling is that kind of specific beats general here, and an Eidolon with the battle medicine feat should be able to do the battle medicine action. And I think specific beats general here. There's lots of forum posts and Reddit threads that go into the details. Check those out if you're interested in the nuance. This is one of those things where you should check in with your GM to see what their ruling is. Now, although your Eidolons normally can't use magical items, there are a small number of items that specifically have an Eidolon tag that they can use. So just be aware of that. You can't give your Eidolon a gun to give them a ranged attack or anything like that, but there are a few items that are on the table. And kind of on this note here, use common sense. I don't think you get to go, oh, that is a ladder, that is an item, your Eidolon can't use that. That's stupid. Like, use some degree of common sense in making your rulings. But for more nuanced stuff that are going to have real impact on combat, talk to the GM. As far as other gear stuff goes, I think the singular most important piece of equipment that every single summoner should have is a Wand of Summoner's Precaution. This is a spell very much custom made for summoners. It is a 10-minute cast time, so this is a pre-buff sort of thing for sure, but it lasts all day. This is going to give you the Sever Conduit action. The gist of which is if your Eidolon is going to die, you can say, "Oh, nope, whoops, get out of there, bud." And you cannot take the damage from that attack, and you can dismiss your Eidolon. Now, you can't manifest your Eidolon for 1 minute after doing this, which essentially means your Eidolon is out of combat. This sounds bad, but if the alternative is you, the PC, go down because you share that health pool, and the boss crits on you for 100 damage, and you just get to say, "Oh, no, 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 I'm not taking that." Like, Pokeball go, Eidolon return, and you get your Eidolon out of there. This is an incredibly powerful option that I think every single summoner needs. And if you are using this with a wand at the beginning of the day, cool, you cast that, you put the wand in your backpack, and that's not going to take up one of your hands, so you can still have a hand free for battle medicine and another hand for a wand or staff that you use normally within combat. Now, why specifically am I saying a wand here? Well, you don't know very many spells, right? And you don't want to take up one of your spells at all times, knowing Summoner's Precaution. If you're going to cast this every single day, a wand or maybe a staff that has it is just going to be so much better for you in the long term, so that this doesn't eat up your very limited spell slots. And let's use this as a time to start transitioning into talking about spells on a summoner. So your summoner at any given time has a maximum number of known spells at 5, and they only have 4 spell slots total, 2 at their highest level slot, and then 2 at the level below that. And a lot of the advice that you would get for a traditional spellcaster is not going to apply here. So for example, as most spellcasters level up, they care less and less about their lower level spell slots. So you start using lower level spell slots to spam reactions, hidebound and wooden double, lose the path, interposing earth, all that sort of stuff. Well, you're never going to do that, and you probably don't want to be burning your 4 spell slots on reaction spells in a lot of cases, unless that reaction spell is just absolutely insane. So if you only know 5 spells, you need to make them count. Just unquestionably, all 5 of those spells need to be bangers. Maybe don't get to be cute. You maybe don't get to learn super, super niche spells. You don't get to be the person who is just prepared to cast every single utility spell. And on a lot of my casters, I try to make sure that I can answer very specific problems with my spell slots, preparing things like Revealing Light and Laughing Fit to deal with invisible enemies or enemies that have very scary reactions. Maybe you want something that can deal with flying enemies. And this is probably not going to be something that you do on a summoner that you would be doing on most other spellcasters. You are going to squeeze a lot of your utility spells into a staff or a wand or maybe an inventory full of scrolls. On a full spellcaster, using a turn to 1 action draw a scroll, 2 action cast a spell is fine, but it feels a little bad. Well, guess what you can do as a summoner? 1 action, draw a spell. 2 action, act together. I cast a spell, and I still get a strike that turn. And so you feel the loss of that 1 action a lot less than other spellcasters would. Meaning that summoners are actually some of the best scroll users because of their action compression that they get in other places. However, the summoner is also an expensive class in terms of your gold budget, because you care about the runes on your hand wraps of Mighty Blows, so your Eidolon's accuracy is appropriate. You care about maxing out your skill items. You probably want an Intimidation 1 for demoralizing, And you probably want one that is associated with your spell tradition if you are doing extend boost so that you're more successful in consistently hitting that on level DC. But you'll also probably want a staff and a wand, and probably some scrolls too. And it might be that this is just too much for the gold budget that you have within your game. I think this is one of those times, especially if you are the only caster in the party, that you say, hey folks, I could really use an extra 30 gold to just like make sure we have water breathing ready or whatever for that given day. And this is something I've done on a couple of spellcasters, and I've given up my money other times when I'm just playing marshals to make sure the casters can do the caster stuff that they need to do. Now, if you've got a wizard in the party who can just like prepare exactly what you need on a given day, maybe you don't have to do that. But if you're the only caster in your party, you know, consider leaving out the hat and asking your party to spare some change. Now, I'm going to recommend some specifics with the caveat that it is a little bit hard to do so because the summoner can be played as a caster of all 4 spell traditions. Here is one of my biggest pieces of advice that is kind of subtle. Every single one of your spells as a summoner is a signature spell. So let's say that you're like level 5, you have level 2 and level 3 spells. The spells that you have at level 2 can be cast at level 3. And this means that if your spells are heightening with level +1, that they are going to be good in 2nd or 3rd rank slots. But let's say in that 2nd level slot, you have a heighten +2 spell, so that would not get new benefits until level 4. Well, that is noticeably less good if you are casting it in a 3rd level slot. So this is something to be aware of, and it's not like you would never ever ever take a heighten +2 spell in your lower level spell slot. There might be some things that are good enough, like say a dehydrate. I believe that is heighten +2. That like you might want that in a 3rd level spell slot because it's very good, and you just wouldn't cast that using a 4th level spell slot in a lot of cases. Note here that the summoner's signature spells are slightly different. They are called unlimited signature spells. So if you have, let's say, a 2nd level spell in a 3rd level slot as heighten +1, you could then cast that spell using a 2nd level spell slot because of this unlimited signature spell feature. So let's say that you learned Thunder Strike at 3rd level. You could cast a 2nd level Thunder Strike using a 2nd level spell slot. So you have very good flexibility. And although this might sound kind of weird as an example, sometimes there are some things like, say, a Dispel Magic that you might not need to cast at a top rank spell if you are just trying to get rid of some minor magical effect in exploration mode or something like that. Now, since you don't have all that many spell slots, getting good sustained value out of your spells is a big deal. And so if you can find a good sustain spell that you like, you're very good at sustaining, right? This whole act together thing keeps coming up, right? You can 2-action cast a spell, Eidolon 1-action strikes, and then you use your final remaining action to sustain a spell. And if we put this in witch terms, it's kind of like you have cackle every turn for free in that regard. That's not actually what it is in reality, but it's pretty darn close. And as far as general advice goes, I would also say that when you are in doubt about what spell you should choose, you should pick the non-blasting option. I know that it feels really, really good to deal big damage as a spellcaster. You find the save that the enemy is weak against, and you cast that spell, and numbers go burr. But you can't be a prolonged blaster. You are just not going to be successful in that role. You shouldn't be doing that if you're trying to play a summoner. So instead, what you should look to do is be the force multiplier. Imagine that you use your spell to give fear to an enemy. Well, now their saves are worse against your cantrip, and their AC is worse against a strike of your Eidolon. And those status effects are going to apply as every other party member attempts to do things to them. So I like having some options as a summoner where you have good debuffs associated with your spell, or you are doing annoying things with your spells that aren't just damage. I think it is very easy to go like, all right, I'm going to prepare, or rather, I'm going to learn Lightning Bolt and Fireball, and like, all right, cool, call it a day. We've got the blasting spells covered. But I think you can do a lot better than that. We'll come back to heal in a second, but here's a couple of examples of new spells that I have my eye on. So the first is Blister Bomb. This is from Battle Cry. 100-foot range, 5-foot burst, Fortitude as the defense. So on a critical success, nothing happens. Bad pandas. On a success, the creatures are sickened 2. On a failure, they get Blister Pox at stage 1, or stage 2 on a critical failure. So taking a look at this, stage 1 is sickened 2. And since this is a disease, they will then be making further saving throws against it and potentially moving up to other stages. And at stage 2, which you can get on a critical failure immediately, they are also taking persistent bleed damage, which is notable because a creature can't reduce its sickened value below 1 while it's taking persistent bleed damage from Blister Pox, meaning that they don't get to just kind of throw up and recover from this sickened condition. So this is a 3rd level spell, so this is competing with your Fireballs and your Lightning Bolts. And sickened is a pretty powerful condition. This is something that is really, really annoying to get as a PC, and not something that you tend to be able to hand out just so easily. So, like, sickened 2 in a 5-foot burst on a success, like, honestly, that feels kind of gross. And this might be very, very good for a summoner who wants to have something that can have a big impact on a fight, but that something doesn't necessarily have to be blasting. For those of you who are mixing Starfinder spells into your Pathfinder games, Void Whispers seems sweet if you are a divine or occult summoner. This has the incapacitation trait, which it very much deserves, let's be clear here. So this is a 30-foot range targeting one creature with a will save. So on a success, the creature is stupefied 1 for 1 round. Whatever. On a failure, regular failure, target begins to wander aimlessly, using each action to step in a random direction. When it moves, the target takes the safest route and doesn't enter hazardous terrain. The spell has a duration of 1 minute, or until a creature uses a hostile action against the target. And on a critical failure, it is even crazier, as then that creature begins to just babble incoherently as well, prompting further will saves in the future. And I think summoners who are attempting to put status effects on foes are going to feel stronger than summoners who are just trying to do damage. Now, this is not to say that you shouldn't have 1 or 2 good damage spells prepared in those 5 different slots. You might want to have a damaging spell that affects Fortitude, a damaging spell that affects Reflex, and then 3 different utility spells. Something like that might give you a good balance. And one other anecdotal thing here. In playing a bunch of different summoner characters, I feel like summoners who have access to the heal spell are noticeably stronger than summoners who do not. Heal is just a very, very good spell, generally speaking, and when you are explicitly trying not to go down because the cost of going down is remanifesting your Eidolon, the burst healing that the heal spell specifically provides is a big deal. And to be able to stabilize yourself after you get crit on by a boss is a big deal. And to have the flexibility to go, oh no, the fighter is in trouble, I will heal them as well, is great. The battle medicine that you are probably taking for this character is fine. that is going to, be noticeable amounts of HP, but the heal spell is really good. There are a couple of spells that very specifically are meant to work with Eidolons, or to a lesser extent, animal companions as well. So I just want to quickly highlight a couple of those. The first of which is Envenom Companion, which says specifically the first time each round the target hits a creature with an unarmed strike that deals piercing or slashing damage, that strike deals an additional 1d8 poison damage. Now, one thing that I did not talk about in selecting your Eidolon is that you also have some flexibility in what damage types you make its attacks do. You're going to have a primary attack and a secondary attack. A lot of times your primary attack will be a d8 damage die, your secondary attack will be a d6 damage die. If you are intending on using Envenom Companion, you might not want your attacks to do bludgeoning damage specifically. Now, this is a third rank spell slot. So you might be asking, Phil, why are we talking about this if this is competing with the fire bolts and the lightning bolts and the blister bombs? Well, let's take a look at the tail end of this spell. A creature that is damaged by this poison must attempt a fortitude save. On a failure, it's also clumsy 1 for 1 round. Now that's the part that we care about. You remember how I said when you use your spell slots, you want them to have a sustained effect over time? This is going to be every time your Eidolon hits something, at least the first time each turn, it is going to prompt this fortitude save for clumsy 1. And this is then getting into those status effects that I was talking about that you want to be doing with your spell slots. Thundering Dominance is another neat one. So this can give your Eidolon a +1 status bonus to their intimidation checks. And once during the spell's duration, which is 1 minute, it can do a Thundering Roar. Each enemy in a 10-foot emanation takes 4d8 sonic damage with a basic will save against your spell DC. And a creature that fails its will save is also frightened 1. So notice the pattern here. It's all about status effects, right? So this can dish out, for a level 2 spell slot, 4d8 sonic damage. That's pretty respectable, while also imparting frightened on a couple of creatures. That's pretty cool. And this might actively become good if your Eidolon is intimidating people. So I believe the Beast Eidolon has an action that does an intimidation check. So if you are a Beast Eidolon specifically, you might actually get value out of this top part. Notably, this is kind of like a 3-action activity for 4d8 sonic damage plus some frightened. But again, you don't super care about that because you have effectively 4 actions per turn cycle. And there is a lot more nuance about spells than just this, but I think this is enough to go ahead and move on to the next section. The Summoner has really good things in its toolkit. You've got martial accuracy, you've got spells, so what do you want out of a free Archetype game? And I think, unquestionably, the best option for a Summoner is the Kineticist, specifically the Wood Kineticist or the feat Timber Sentinel. Now this is a notoriously powerful feat, as it gives you infinite max level casts of the spell Protector tree. Now, let's think about what we have been saying all video. The Summoner wants to take a 2-action activity and then 2 1-action activities. The Summoner has 4 spell slots. So if you were told, for a Dedication feat and then 1 free Archetype feat at 4th level, you could have infinite casts of a top rank spell that is actively good because it can defend your Eidolon and make your HP pool go further and keep your Eidolon from unmanifesting, like, this is unquestionably insane. And this is normally a very, very powerful feature, but on the Summoner, who does not have very many spell slots, this is just absolutely perfect. However, and I'm going to tell you from personal experience, I do not believe that this is fun. If your goal is to win, and you want to optimize, and you want to win combats, this is going to do that. This is going to feel incredibly powerful. However, if you want to have fun, and you want to do summoner stuff, and you want dynamic and interesting turns, this is not that. So this is a let the buyer beware situation. This is good, but I'm not going to say it's going to be fun for you or your GM. Now, if 2 tokens is not enough for you, consider a Beastmaster dedication. Now, your Eidolon does not have the minion trait. And normally, this is the thing that keeps you from accruing a whole bunch of different tokens on the map, is because you only get to have, say, 1 animal companion, because you only get to have 1 thing out with the minion trait at a time. So if you want to have 3 tokens on the board at the start of combat, you can have your Summoner PC, you can have your Eidolon, and then you can have your Beastmaster Companion or Clockwork Reanimator Companion or whatever. And once it becomes a mature animal companion at level 4 and it gets its independent action, like, oh buddy, if you would like to take a very large number of game actions in a single turn, this'll do it. But make sure you're real comfortable with your character if you're going to do this, because your turns could start taking quite a long time. Another thing that you could do to power up your character is just make your battle medicine better. And this is something that you already might be doing, like by taking Godless Healing, Mortal Healing, Paragon, Battle Medicine, and the general feat that makes you better at receiving battle medicine. I think it's Robust Health. There's a lot of options to already do that. The medic can make that even better by giving the target of your treat wounds or battle medicine a circumstance bonus to the amount of hit points you heal. And if the action compression you already have isn't enough, you can also get the Doctor's Visitation action to do a single action stride and then battle medicine. Or I guess treat poison. That comes up very rarely. As a charisma-oriented class, you are absolutely going to have other options for what you could be doing with your free archetype slots, and you could very easily go into a roleplay-oriented dedication instead. One thing to keep in mind is that since your Eidolon is going to share your various skill training proficiencies, the more of those that you pick up from various places, it means that not only can you do more, but your Eidolon can also do more. So some of those dedications that are just going to improve skills or give you more skill trainings, your things like Dandy and Fan Dancer, Twilight Speaker, that sort of stuff, those are going to be worth looking into as well if you're not just fully focused on combat. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. I think the Summoner slaps. I think this class is very, very good. I think building a Summoner is a little bit frustrating if you are a new player. I think there's a lot of level 1 choices to be made. You're picking a spell tradition, you're picking an Eidolon type, you're picking whether that Eidolon is strength or dex focused. You're then kind of picking what sort of attacks they're going to be doing on top of that. I think at level 1, this class can feel a little bit overwhelming, but I think once you understand the basics of the Summoner, the class is very simple, and I think feat selection is pretty intuitive once you understand your level 1 character. You'll notice that I did not go into a feat selection portion of this guide and deep dive, and that's honestly because I think a lot of times it's going to be straightforward. Like, oh, it's level 6. I need to take my reactive strike. That's really good. Or, ooh, I want to keep taking the feats that make me good at magic. Or, ooh, I want to keep taking the feats that make my Eidolon bigger and bigger and bigger. I think you are probably going to feel like you don't peak as high as many other classes. You're not going to have that, consistent physical damage output of the Barbarian who gets to add a ton of flat damage from Rage. You don't have the accuracy of the Fighter. You don't have the spell slots of the Sorcerer. You don't have the huge number of prepared spells and utility of the Wizard. But in exchange, you have excellent consistency. You have 4 actions a turn, even if you're only cantripping instead of casting a max rank spell. If you're doing that and attacking and demoralizing or something like that, your turns are probably still very good. You have that excellent action economy that can keep getting better and better and better. And one of my favorite things about the Summoner is a little subtle, but your level ups are often very, very impactful in terms of how much they change your character. Because at certain level thresholds, you change what level spells you have access to, and that often really changes how your character plays. And so I love that about the Summoner, because you don't keep doing the same tricks again and again and again. As you level up, you feel noticeable changes to your character, or your Eidolon goes and picks up a new activity that it is capable of doing, and now you just feel like you have more and more options. And I like that the Summoner doesn't just feel like it is doing the same thing throughout the entire campaign. Yes, there is going to be a lot of Electric Arc Strike plus one other thing, but as far as your spell slots go and 2-action activities go, those will change a lot over time. But the Summoner kind of requires every single stat except for Strength in a lot of cases. You need that Con to increase the HP between you and your Eidolon. You need your Charisma for your casting stat. You need your Dexterity for your own personal AC. And then you often end up needing Wisdom for your Extend Boost checks. And when you have a class that requires 4 different stats to be reasonable, you're going to feel holes, and you might feel like you are actively sacrificing something on this character at any given time to make some of the other stuff work. And with that, I think I'm going to call it a day here. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, feel free to leave a like, leave me some comments. If there's anything you thought that should have been in this guide that didn't make it, let me know. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. If you made it this far in the video and you're not subscribed yet, consider doing that on the way out. There's always more content coming on this channel. All right, see ya.